Hello and welcome to the first webinar of the year from the Alliance of Girls' Schools. I'm Teva Smith, the Director of Communications, and it is my pleasure to welcome you today and host this webinar. We know that the mental well-being of leaders, staff and students has been under enormous pressure over the last 2 years, which is why we're bringing you 5 different webinars this year in our mental health and well-being series, each with a focus on a different aspect of nurturing and supporting the well-being in your school community. Today is the first webinar of that series, and we are fortunate to have 4 experienced educators lined up to share the student well-being strategies from their schools. Each presenter will speak for 15 minutes, and then I will come back for a group Q&A once they've all finished. Please post your questions in the Q&A, and then we will come back to those at the end, but it would be very helpful if you posted your question with the name of the presenter at the beginning, and that way I know who to pose the questions to at the end. I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers, although their biographies do them far more justice, and those are available on the events page for this webinar on our website. But as a brief introduction, Dr. Nicole Archard is principal of Loreto College in Marryatville in South Australia. Nicole is a specialist educator of girls and has taught and held a variety of leadership positions in girls' schools, both in New South Wales and South Australia. Nicole's PhD thesis was on the topic of girls' education and women in leadership. Rachel McMillan is Acting Deputy Principal Pastoral for 2022 at St Hilda's Collegiate in Dunedin. And this year, she looks forward to fostering more positive relationships and ensuring people realise their creative agency by prioritising well-being. Leona Gooch is Deputy Principal of Corowa Anglican Girls' School in Melbourne. She's worked at 5 schools across 3 countries in an array of leadership roles and has an avid interest in learning spaces, technology, entrepreneurship, innovation, and of course, well-being. And Jennifer Oaten is Principal of Santa Maria College in Perth. She's an educational leader who's passionate about ensuring girls reach their potential. Jennifer aims to provide opportunities for every girl to be empowered, to have a voice, and to believe that anything is possible. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Nicole, who's our first presenter today. And thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Teva, and welcome everyone who is listening in this morning or this afternoon, depending on what state you are in. So I'm going to go over our wellbeing program from Loreto College, and I will just start by pointing out, the common aspect. We're all here because we are a girls' school and we're a Loreto school, and it's that fundamental understanding that we are here with the purpose to get the best outcomes for girls and young women, and that core purpose therefore drives us forward, and it's very much linked to wellbeing outcomes as what it is regarding learning outcomes. So at Loreto we use a framework which is our Loreto education model, and you'll see those 3 areas of wellbeing, learning and holistic education. Now, we do not place one of those areas above the other, and it's very much about the interrelationship and the interdependence of those 3 areas on each other. We know that girls can't flourish in their learning unless their wellbeing is catered for, and the learning that happens outside of the classroom in many different ways is just as important as what happens in the classroom. So basically, that notion of wellbeing is about how do girls flourish? How do they flourish in relation to their emotional intelligence, their sense of purpose, establishing that their identity, their voice, all of those things that we know are really important and what we're here to address as being a girls' school. So what we have done at Loreto is established what we call this our SEED program. It's our social, emotional and academic development program. So we know that there's a very strong relationship between each of those areas, and if we take a holistic approach as well as a developmental approach, then that's going to be the best thing that we can do for the girls in our care. So if we have a look, I know this framework is difficult to read, but it is available on our website if you want to go and have a look. But if we look at particular focus areas, such as relationships, our idea is looking at how they then move along developmentally as girls grow. So we start when girls are young in reception or kindergarten in other states, about learning about relationships. By the time they're moving into upper primary, it's about exploring new relationships. Years 7 and 8 is about that transition and what happens with girls regarding relationships once they hit into secondary schooling, and they need to broaden those relationships, into moving into adolescence and looking at, well, how do you construct positive relationships, and then cultivating strong and healthy relationships so that we're preparing girls for when they leave school in the type of relationships that are going to then set them up for life. And that's particularly important in our current context. So in understanding our SEED program, this program is both evidence-driven and evidence gathering. So we developed that framework by looking really thoroughly at all of the research regarding well-being, social emotional intelligence, how girls learn, all aspects of research. And we put that together in summarising that down into what are all of the aspects that our framework needed to cover, and then how did that change developmentally. So that evidence-driven and looking at best practice was really important. The other reason we developed this framework was that there was no framework that existed regarding a wellbeing program that was just for girls. The off-the-shelf programs just look at childhood, adolescence, and they don't differentiate between the differences in male and female, and how that might be different needs of how we deal with relationships, and educating girls is going to be very different to how we would do that with teenage boys. How girls learn is very different to how boys learn. So we had that need to make sure that we were driving this program ourselves. So it's very much an evidence-driven program, but it's also an evidence-gathering program. And that's what I'm going to focus on mainly for the rest of this presentation, about how we gather evidence and then how we use that evidence to form the SEED program. So our SEED program has formal lessons twice a week across the whole school. We have formal lessons where we have developed curriculum that targets all of those areas, but it's also a holistic approach across the school. So it moves into our philosophy of teaching, our philosophy of learning, our co-curricular program, our sport program. It basically encompasses everything that we are as a school and how we then engage and interact through all of the roles that we do, and the outcomes for our girls. So it's this continual process of development. And that's what makes it different to an off-the-shelf model, where you might just, roll out the same activities year by year. We're using evidence in order to modify and change that. So it's cohort-driven, student voice-driven, and what the needs are of particular groups at the time. And needless to say, we've been recognised twice now with awards for this program because it is unique and it is very much evidence-driven regarding best practice. So I'm going to go through these areas of using data to drive best practice. Just checking the time. So there are multiple ways in which we gather data. One of these ways is we use Student Pulse from years 4 through to 12. And this is our thermometer, if you like, of checking the vital signs of our school. How do we know how our girls are going? Student Pulse, if you're not familiar with it, is a product through Educator Impact. It operates exactly where the girls are at. They like to use technology. They like to access things, whether it's through their mobile phones or through their laptops. So it engages them with the technology they're familiar with. So we start that off by asking the girls these questions every week, but they can answer them daily if they wish to, but at least once a week, whether they need help and how they're feeling. So as a principal of the school or our key staff in the school who are looking after our girls, we can actually see every student across the school and we know where they're at. If they ask for help, then we're immediately notified of that. It comes through and they can choose who they're asking for help from. Or if they're feeling a particular way, we can also track that and monitor it over time. But the other thing that we're doing through Student Pulse is that we are gathering wellbeing measures, and in relation to each of these areas that you can see: feeling valued and safe, healthy, material basics, learning, their participation, their sense of identity and culture. And we can see how we're tracking as a school against either schools in South Australia or the rest of Australia. And you can see there our scores in that middle column indicate that we're tracking above the other schools in Australia, and we're tracking above norms in relation to each of these areas. So through this program, we can also then drill down. This is an example of some of the heat map that we can see. So in the areas of valued and safe, I can see, well, what are the areas that fall under that, such as bullying, school climate, home climate, and I can see across every year group and class group in the school how we're tracking in that area. And as it suggests with a heat map, it will highlight year groups or classes where that might be tracking at a lower rate. I can also go into each of those areas and I can look at the individual questions that then feed up into that data to see, well, if there's an issue of bullying, what are the types of things that the girls are reporting there? And the other thing I really like about this program, because we focus on wellbeing, about expressions of gratitude. So all of our girls through their Pulse check-in can also send expressions of gratitude to other students or to teachers in the school. And you can see there that the most common, and this is just so far this year, we've only been going for 3.5 weeks, so this is pretty good. The students have sent 292 expressions of kindness to another student and 20 to those of teachers. So I actually really love that they are more likely to express this to each other than teachers. But I also really appreciate, I might do a talk at assembly about a particular topic, and then I'll get an expression of gratitude that will be sent to me by a student to give thanks for that topic because it touched them in a particular way, etc. The other part of our tracking comes down to how we then combine our wellbeing data with our academic data. We call this program Loreto Analytics. It's driven through obviously another program that is sitting underneath that. So what we are doing is then looking at all the information that we have on students. We have a value or goal at our school that says no invisible children, and we hold no invisible children very, very high. So that is something we communicate to all staff, to all parents, no invisible children. So if we don't want invisible children, what are the tracking processes that we need to put in place to make sure we're picking things up early and we're seeing problems before they emerge to be big problems. So much like tracking our Student Pulse data about how they're feeling and their wellbeing attributes, we then also look at the tracking of their academic data. But tied into that, this is also their wellbeing data and their pastoral data. So we're looking at tracking against absenteeism, because we know absenteeism or being late is one of the first signs that something might be going wrong for a student. We are also tracking goal setting so that the students can actually set their goals. We can share those goals with the school community and we can encourage and work with the girls towards those goals. We're tracking their academic results, and we can also see when they start to dip or where there might be a problem that's starting to go wrong. And we know that when something starts to show wrong academically, there's normally a wellbeing issue that is underpinning that. So there's all these different ways that then we can start to really know our students, know them well, and intervene early. And this is just an example of another aspect of the tracking sheet that comes through what we call as Loreto Analytics. And we can see, as a student tracking the same, up, down, what do we need to do with regard to intervention? And for us, intervention is the key. Intervention is about everything and early intervention. So we have all of these mechanisms for tracking students and for making sure that we have the information that we need on them, that that information is shared broadly across our school community, and that those with areas of responsibility know what they need to do to go in and support that student. But we also have then whole school tracking that brings the important team of teachers and staff together in order to go through that information and look at what intervention needs to take place. So on a fortnightly basis, every student in our school, junior school and senior school, is actually part of a student tracking meeting where they are discussed by a group of staff in relation to their well-being, how they're going at school, how they're going with their friends, what's going on at home, what interventions are needed. And those interventions might be support interventions, but they might also be enrichment interventions as well. So it's a very thorough process that we have. The results, if I go back to data, the results show us that what we're doing is making a difference. And that's the thing about wellbeing programs. How do you know what you're doing is actually making a difference? And if you're not collecting evidence on that, then you actually don't know. And then if you're not analysing that evidence, tracking the information, using that to then feed back to the development of the program, then you're not actually doing best practice. So it's about making sure that that whole cycle is part of our wellbeing programs, and that we've got clear evidence that says it's making a difference. We can see what it's doing for our girls, and that's the best that both our students and ourselves could ask for. So thank you very much for that opportunity to give you that short snapshot into wellbeing at Loreto.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko maua o te maunga, ko wairo te awa, ko war spirit te waka. No tauranga ahau ki o kāhau te kāinga. Ko Neville Stewart toko papa, ko Catherine Stewart toko mama, ko Rachel McMillan toko ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Rachel McMillan, and I grew up in the Bay of Plenty, which is in the North Island, Te Ika a Maui. 2 decades ago, I moved to Otago in the South Island, Te Waipounamu, starting my work here at St Hilda's Collegiate School with Performing Arts in 2011. Since then, I've enjoyed supporting our students as a dean, and this year I'm acting DP Pastoral. So wellbeing is a fundamental part of my job. In the past 10 years, our wellbeing framework has developed with a lot of support from our principal, counsellor and board of trustees. In Aotearoa, the New Zealand curriculum fosters a Māori health model, Te Whare Tapa Whā, and this concept is based around the imagery of a stable structure, a whare or a house. Each wall of the house contains a cornerstone of balanced health. They are physical, spiritual, mental and family, or whānau. Within this concept, we utilise a strategy based around the 5 ways to wellbeing by our Mental Health Foundation here in New Zealand. These include being able to connect, be active, take notice, keep learning, and give. Our school values promote these strategies and connect our community. As we come together for assemblies and chapels to explore big ideas such as faith, we want our students and staff to be their best authentic selves. We strive to be innovative and solution focused, and we know that by working constructively together, we can achieve more. So we sum these values up as be you, can do, better together, and explore faith. We focus our attention on one value each term, and we've made them much more visible around our campus. About 6 years ago, we introduced vertical whānau groups that include years 7 to 13 students, so 10 to 18-year-olds. Students stay with the same whānau or family throughout their time with us, and their teacher gets to know them well by working on annual goal setting and joining in fun activities that don't involve technological devices for about 30 minutes a week. When students leave school, their whānau teacher celebrates their achievements by writing their testimonial. This is a quote. If you've registered for this, obviously you've registered for this presentation, you'll be sent this information as well as links to what I'm talking about and where I've sourced this quote from. Whānau principles are about relationships, kinship, and a sense of family connection. It is created through shared experiences and working together and provides people with a sense of belonging. It comes with rights and obligations which serve to strengthen each member of that whānau group. This year, we're tackling the disruption caused by COVID with extended whānau groups. By combining 4 groups and teachers together, students can better support each other with the increased workload that absences cause. I should say students and teachers can better support each other. This year, I trained all of our Year 13 cohort to be leaders of our peer mentoring program, and we've named these leaders Tatariki after the leader of a flock of kias. We give them time, space, and resources to have agency, take charge of their younger peers, and build stronger connections. As we all know, the past 2 years have been isolating, so whānau and connections are our wellbeing priority now. Our prefect roles are highly sought after, so we've increased student voice about wellbeing by adapting our liaison prefect roles to wellbeing and community liaisons. These prefects work closely with our counsellor, Marcel Nada-Turner, and the student wellbeing group. Examples of wellbeing and community liaison initiatives range from commissioning uplifting quotes and murals in the student toilets to giving whānau groups a baby plant to look after. Our other prefects do a lot of work for school morale and wellbeing. The sports prefects promote being active with lunchtime activities like chalk art in the quad, dance, yoga, fitness groups, and walkie-talkies, which is off-site walking adventures. And our Māori and Pacifica prefects promote language acquisition and an increased understanding of tikanga. Our sacrosancts provide a chance for reflection and spiritual enrichment in chapel. When there is an occasion to celebrate, all of our prefects take the opportunity to decorate our school entrance and meet and greet students, sometimes handing out treats or taking photos. To raise awareness and reduce anxiety, the whole school embarks on mindfulness for a few minutes twice a day. Marcel has been instrumental in educating our community about the scientifically proven positive effects on the brain and body as we practice responding rather than reacting to situations. Once a week, a staff member leads mindfulness during staff briefing. And before our red COVID traffic light system started, we sang during staff briefing, which was a fun boost to the start of the day. To regroup after lunch, we have sustained silent reading. So we regularly practice ways to find solace and new perspectives. We have an amazing Dean's team who get non-contact time for robust pastoral care, and our fantastic counsellor Marcel Nada-Turner's hours have been increased from part-time to full-time, which acknowledges the importance of looking after our mental health. Marcel's office has been renovated to accommodate larger meetings, and our school wellbeing dog, Tilly, Matilda, who brings so much joy to people every day. Our staff room has also been upgraded to support staff wellbeing through homeliness, comfort, and a variety of activities that bring people together like puzzles, newspapers, quizzes, and a shared library. One size does definitely not fit all, so regular check-ins are necessary to accommodate the variety of ever-changing staff, including our incredible support staff and our students' needs. We too use the EI Pulse app that Nicole was just mentioning to assist with this data gathering, and our staff's social and wellbeing group meet regularly to discuss ways to remain buoyant with a feeling of wholeness to propel us forwards. In this vein, we hope staff will be able to model positive wellbeing practices to all our students. We're working towards building a new shared space canteen and library with an enhanced chapel that can house the entire school community, and making our outside working environment more comfortable, including more play areas, and to assist with the promotion of our lunchtime games and activities. Another initiative that's come about this year is our new uniform, which is much more versatile to support this range of fun, all the activities and comfortable learning. Hopefully this has been a useful overview about some of the wellbeing strategies we use in a special character integrated boarding school setting. And in true St Hilda's collegiate style, I'd like to finish with a quote by Jean Kabat-Zinn: "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf." No hore, ora mai. Stay well. Kia ora.
Hi everyone, my name is Liana Gooch from Kororoa Anglican Girls School. Our blueprint for our mental health strategy really commenced in 2018 when we started to see some alarming statistics emerging out of national surveys such as Mission Australia, particularly around the field of coping with stress and mental health. Obviously this has been exacerbated by the pandemic, and when we looked at figures again in 2020, obviously, it was quite disturbing to see that 42.6% of young people were feeling stressed all the time or part of the time. So we really wanted to equip our young people with the strategies and skills to support their well-being and to manage their mental health. So the architects of our mental health strategy have been members of our wellbeing team, who are comprised of our school educational psychologist, our school counsellor, our chaplain, and back then our deputy principal of wellbeing, and I've recently joined the team. Our strategy is greatly informed by research, particularly in the field of social emotional learning, because we are very much focused on the interface between learning and wellbeing, rather than treat them as separate elements. So we turn to some experts to inform our strategy, particularly Professor Helen Cahill, who's the Director of the Youth Research Centre and the Deputy Dean of the Melbourne Graduate School of Education at the University of Melbourne. We also drew on the expertise of Luca Parry, who is the founding executive of Karanga, the Global Alliance for Social Emotional Learning and Life Skills. And Luca presented to our staff at the beginning of 2021 so that they had a really firm foundation of what constituted social emotional learning. And also he talked about some of the frameworks we can draw on for strategies. Now, as we were designing our mental health strategy, we very much wanted a strategy that was created specifically for our context and community. Our intention was to both empower and enable our students to be able to self-manage and track their well-being, as well as us as a community, for our parents, for our staff and our students, to have a common language to talk about with well-being. Along the way, we also worked out that we needed to have some sort of platform too, so that would allow our students to track and manage their well-being. So let's have a little look at our model of our strategy. So we decided to use the symbol of a tree because it represented to us that everyone was thriving and flourishing. And the roots of our tree are very much fed by key elements of our school values, obviously the field of social emotional learning, and character. Character education informs many of our other frameworks, so we wanted to make sure that also was infused in our strategy. Now, if you look at this, you'll see that there are three key branches. None of these are more important than the other. And around each of the branches are clustered a number of leaves, which are the actions that support mental health. So for those of us in Melbourne, as we were emerging out of some of the lockdowns, connectedness became a priority. And so many of the actions of the leaves around those were really crucial to support the reconnection of our community, the ceremonies that are very much part of our fabric of our school, and the idea of collaborating together. Now, what we're discovering as we rolled out our strategy is that this strategy is infusing into everything we do, as well as the language. Last year, towards the end of the year, we started talking about the work of Adam Grant and his TED Talk when he was describing languishing. You know, that state when you're not depressed, but you're not flourishing. It's that sort of meh sort of state that we found ourselves in during this pandemic. So one of the antidotes that he's talked about is mastery, but also mindfulness and matters. So finding purpose in anything that we do. This year, one of our signature programs that we've been looking at is K-Service. So making sure our Year 10 students are able to explore some service action during their school schedule. So as we were introducing this new initiative and understanding why it's so important to undertake service, kindness to self, kindness to others, and how important it is to your mental health, we aligned it with our mental health strategy so they could also see the importance of its purpose. So all of these things are often talked about in conjunction in many of the things that we do on a daily basis. One of the initiatives that we also have developed that I previously mentioned was our student dashboard. So what I've provided for you here on the screen is a prototype. So you'll see my name on here, and we have crew teachers who also have a part to play. Each student is involved in a circles, community or crew class. So it has elements of learning as well as wellbeing. So on our wellbeing tab, we wanted to allow our students to be able to track and manage their wellbeing, as I mentioned before. So each week we have devised, aligned with our mental health strategy tree, a whole array of different aspects that we want our students to be able to measure. Things like, sleep, physical activity, but we also have a sense of achievement, accomplishment, also participation. So they are able to track that over a graph, which gives them a very good way of checking their progress. We also have developed through their circle, crew and community classes a self-care plan. So there's that language coming through again. And we've devised 6 key positive coping strategies where the students have to identify a general wellbeing strategy and a goal associated with that, and then a school-based coping strategy. Because what we discovered is that while you can have a strategy and goal for general that you can apply outside of school, sometimes that doesn't quite suit for a school context. So if you find running is really important for your de-stressing, obviously you can't always be doing that in class time. So it may be a case of where you go for a walk, for example, in a break time. So this is a way for our students to set goals at the start of the term and then also to reflect on it at the end. What this means is that they've got this amazing sort of check-in each week, and it means for our staff too that we can also have a look in to see at individual students, and ultimately we'll be able to look at classes and also for cohorts, so we can determine whether initiatives we need to implement are working, what's the impact. Students in conjunction with this can also look at their attendance. The feedback when we rolled this out with our 7 and 8s last year was very positive, and in fact they've had an opportunity to feed into some of the coping strategies, so that actually becomes like a drop-down menu. We're rolling out this year with our year 5 to 12 students, so they too will also be able to provide feedback. In conjunction with this, over the last couple of years, we've also developed 11 attributes. These are founded on the PR6 resiliency model, and they really capture the dispositions and skills we want to develop in our learners. One of those indicators is actually being kind and grateful. So we're hoping that as students experience the attributes this year, we trialled these also last year, they can identify where they're sitting with their attributes, and our staff, as part of an interactive rubric, will also be able to indicate where they see the students. So there's a great conversation and synergy with our mental health dashboard. You'll also see that students will be able to reference the actual strategy. So we have an interactive tree, so the students can actually tap in on each of the leaves and find some examples and strategies to support them as they're developing their self-care plan. Our staff have also been involved last year with working on atomic actions. So as we return to school, what the staff were doing was working in year levels to identify what's 1 or 2 challenges that they'd like to address and support our students' wellbeing. From there, they developed a very small action that they could all trial and then roll that out. And then we came back as teams to see the impact or whether we needed to recalibrate. We're also planning to work on a staff version of this, which will be confidential for each staff member, where they too can map their well-being with their healthy routines each week and do their own self-care plans. So it's very much catering for our whole community. Now, in conjunction with this, we also have some new initiatives that we are applying. For a group of Year 9 students who are interested and some staff, they'll be able to trial in conjunction with the University of Melbourne Bio-Dash. Now, this is with work to do with a professor who's in the Centre of Wellbeing Science, and her work really focuses on Diane Vella-Broderick. Her work is about looking at the biofeedback devices and gaming features that equip people with strategies to focus, manage stress, and reduce anxiety. What it will mean for our students is that they can actually see what impact some of their positive coping strategies are having on their reactions to stress, so they can work out what are the best ones to apply. So we're very excited about that. We also have some other initiatives that I'll be able to talk about once we've rolled those out later in the year. We're very excited this year because at Corowa, at the start of term 2, we have the opening of our Sports and Wellbeing Centre, where all of our wellbeing staff will be placed, and we'll also be able to apply many of the routines that support our mental health strategy. Professional learning has been a priority for all of our staff, but also other members of our community. So, for example, our pop-up parenting program has been very much about providing access to our parents about strategies that they can support their students with. And stop sharing there. One of the I think key priorities is listening to experts to support our parents and students during their pandemic. So we've heard from experts such as Helen Cahill to explain an understanding of social emotional learning strategies that parents can be applying to support their students. And we also heard from Dr. Mark Cross, who's an authority in the field of anxiety. He's written a book about anxiety. He was the co-author of Changing Minds. He worked with our Year 11 and 12 students to understand the difference between anxiety and stress. And he also talked to our parents to also support them in that field. So I hope you can see that mental health and wellbeing is very much entrenched in everything we do. It's not separate from the learning. Our strategies, dashboard, and other initiatives will continue to evolve, adapt, and respond to the input from our staff, our students, and our parents, and point of need for our community. So we look forward to seeing how this develops. Thank you very much.
I think we might just be having a small technical issue, but I'm sure we'll be back up and running in 1 minute.
Ask them if they can see that screen. Should be all good now.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome from Santa Maria in Perth. It's my privilege this morning to share with you a little bit about our mental health strategy, but particularly also focusing on some practical strategies that people will be able to take away and hopefully use in their own college. We're very understanding that schools are doing many different things. And I guess for us here at the college is we are really aiming to be proactive rather than reactive in terms of mental health. So, hopefully some of the strategies that I share today will be useful for you. In terms of our journey, we began with working out where we wanted to get to. So first of all, we identified our stakeholders, we developed a vision, collected some data and analysed these results. We then developed a framework, and then we started on some of the key actions that we wanted to implement. So from there, I'm now going to just go into a little bit of detail into each of those areas. I chose the picture of the road because mental health is a long road. There's lots of twists and turns, and there's many challenges that we face as schools in implementing and really responding to mental health in our schools. The next picture I've chosen is of our students, and as schools and as professionals, we are very quick and very skilled at developing and implementing programs. However, all the work that we do is for our students, and they really need to be at the centre of the work that we do. So our belief is that the student's voice is key in all the work we do in student mental health. What teachers think is not always what students think. So hearing our students is very, very important. So I guess really the key question is how can students be involved in both the decisions and the design of any opportunities or programs that we develop for schools? Next, we identified our stakeholders. That was really important for us because we believe that it's more than a school responsibility. So we wanted our parents to be involved, but we also wanted our students to be involved. And so we decided that a co-design process with these three groups was the most important because we wanted this to be a whole school commitment with a common language. In terms of getting interest, I wrote a news blog which provided a link for parents to register their interest in being involved. We emailed all students asking for their interest, and we also called for interested staff. And from the staff, we had our college nurse, heads of learning, deans, teachers, but also support staff involved in this process and this co-design process. So some of the things that we did in developing our strategy, we ran some workshops, which we called a table of 20. We created a shared vision, which I'll share with you in a moment. We developed some questions, and there were 13 of these to gather data because we wanted to really understand what our context was, what our parents believed, what our girls believed, but also what our staff felt was important, because it is different for every school. Something that was key for us was student mental health ambassadors. So they were critical in determining how we would gather the information, and they also helped us in preparing what those resources would be that we would use to collect data. Some of the sorts of things that we did surveys online. However, we wanted more than just surveys to be guiding our data. So we also used face-to-face activities. We had voting boxes where the girls were given tokens, which they placed in boxes to help us have a more practical and hands-on method of gaining data, particularly from our younger students. And we also had what we called conversation tubes, which in year groups, the girls provided us with data by working in small groups in their year groups. And we also had voluntary surveys, which we encouraged our staff to participate in. 70 staff contributed, and we also had 178 parents that contributed via surveys that we sent out to our college community. So we ended up with a significant amount of data, and that then guided the work that we did. In terms of our shared vision, and we felt this was the very first step in developing a mental health strategy, and that was developed both with our parents, our staff, and our students. And that became really key in the work that we were going to do. So this was our definition as a school of what we wanted our mental health strategy to achieve. It was really interesting in terms of the mental health challenges and the data that was presented to us. So we collated it in three ways: what the students said, what the parents said, and what the staff said. And it's really interesting if you look at the top three in each of those areas and what the similarities were between those groups. It was interesting to see that the parents felt the bullying and friendship issues would be a key contributor, whereas the students didn't feel that was the number one. Certainly anxiety rated very highly, and then the others you can see there were quite varied. So this was a really interesting starting point for us to understand what these groups within our community felt were some of the key challenges leading to mental health issues. And they're obviously very varied for individuals, but we wanted to get a sense for our community what that looked like. We then delved a little bit deeper in terms of the different year groups to really try and understand what were the key issues that our students identified as being key in terms of mental health issues. And what was interesting for us was then to reflect and to determine whether our pastoral care programs that we had for each year group really matched what the students needed and felt, or whether it was just our perception as staff. And it's interesting to see in with year fives they've put stress related to school. Part of that is that we are a school that has our starting point is year 5. We don't have younger students. And so for them, that first starting point for school was important. In year 6 and year 7, bullying and friendship were the 2 areas where they felt were the areas that led to mental health issues. This changed then in year 8, and year 9 and 10, body image became the 2 key areas that our students felt were key contributors to mental health issues. While year 11 and 12, stress related to school, certainly to exams and learning and assessments, were areas that then became more significant. So these were really interesting trends for us to then be able to look at our pastoral care programs and see whether we had enough focus on these particular areas. Something that we did find was that we had done more work in the more senior years on body image. However, we've now moved that down to be a key focus in year 9 and year 10. In terms of collecting our data, we really gathered all the information from our community. And I guess something that is a little different to our mental health strategy is we've based it on the data gathered from our community, while we also considered evidence and research from professionals. We also wanted to understand more about our contacts at Santa Maria. And so the information then was gathered under culture and values, so the environment that we provide here at the college for our students. We also wanted to understand in terms of the knowledge that our girls had, our parents had, but also our staff had. So what was their understanding of anxiety? What was their understanding of what stress was? Some of the key areas that lead to mental health challenges. But we also wanted to be very proactive and ensure that our girls had the skills needed to manage their mental health, and particularly any challenges that they may face in their journey. And also key was support. So how to seek help. So was that in terms of parents? Was it in terms of friends? So for example, with our girls, often they would go to other girls, and how do those girls then respond or support friends? But we also wanted them to really clearly understand what professional help was available here at the college, and also how we could help them connect with external services if that was needed. So from there, we wanted to have a guide for our college, and we developed our mental health strategy, which, as you can see there are 4 pillars, which are based on those 4 which I've just mentioned. Our strategic objective at the top there is our vision for the college. This strategy will be available to all participants and will be shared so that if anybody wants to have a closer look, they can do that. From here, we then identified what the actions would be underneath each of those pillars to ensure that we were very, very clear about what we wanted to achieve in each of these 4 areas of our strategy. This also enabled us to link all the activities that go on in our college, and many other schools have shared examples today. But when proposals are put forward to our Director of Pastoral Care, they need to link to one of these pillars. So we could then very much report, indicate our progress in, and also see where our areas of greatest need were in these different areas. So all proposal must be linked to the strategy. And it also enabled me as principal to be able to report to our community our progress in these different areas. And we do that via our news blog under these 4 pillars that we have. So that is our strategy. And what I decided was that for schools who are on very varying journeys, that you may like to hear of some of the practical strategies that we have implemented, which have been linked back to the actions of our mental health strategy. So I will share with you some of those. So the first one is student leadership. And as I've mentioned, our students have played a key role in developing the strategy, but then in also some of the things that we have implemented. So we've recently included a Year 12 Wellbeing captain who sits alongside our college executive leaders, and that's a really important indication of the value we place on wellbeing. We also have student ambassadors in each year group, which are our mental health ambassadors. So every group from year 5 to 12 have a number of students that volunteer and are part of a committee that drives many of our strategies. Secondly, we wanted to have a common language of mental health, and this is for staff, students, and our parents. So we developed an A to Z of positive mental health, and the language chosen here was very much reviewed by students. So we worked with students, but then they gave the final sign off because some of the words that we chose weren't then words that students fully understood. So we felt it was really important that the language was clearly for students and understood by students. We also have this printed in our student planner each year, and we also have other activities and quotes and a range of things in our student planner to assist students. Some of the student initiatives, and there's been many, but a few of them are mentioned here. So from a wellbeing assembly that focused on inclusion, Are You OK benches, which was a Year 12 proposal, where the girls were encouraged to have conversations with their friends. Kindness cards, and this was an International Day of the Girl activity run by our students for the students, where they pay forward positive affirmations to other students. In terms of Health Week, we also had many activities organised by the students, along with Are You OK Day activities. We've also had our borders, and they're a really important part of our community. And it was not so much just the final outcome where we now have a blue tree on college grounds, but also a piece of junk art, as they called it, which was commissioned by an artist to recognise the health issues of farming communities. But it was more about the process that the students went through and the use of the language, but really encouraging students to talk about and use the language related to mental health. And even the phrase mental health is now being really widely used in our community. And we think that that is really significant. Something else that we used as a college was Change Your Thinking, which is a book written by Sarah Edelman. Many of our staff have read this book, and it is very much about positive and practical ways to overcome stress and negative emotions. We also were fortunate to have Sarah Edelman present workshops to our parents, of which we had over 100 parents attend, to our staff and to our whole Year 9 cohort, because we felt they were the ones that could benefit most. We've also had a parent book club facilitated by our college for psychologists. And we've also developed a Reason for Being program for our Year 9 students, which really addresses questions around who am I to others, and who am I in the world? And we do this as an alternative program that runs when our Year 9 camp program is being run. So we work with half the cohort on this program. And we feel that that's a really significant program, particularly in Year 9, where we really believe is a significant area of need for students. In terms of the data that we gathered, friendship and relationships was absolutely key to many of the areas or issues that lead to mental health issues. So if students feel a sense of belonging and a sense of community, their mental health will be in a much better place. So we now have programs in Year 5 and 6, but also in our Year 7 transition program. Because as we know, when students come into Year 7, many of their friendships change, they establish new friendships, and we need our girls to have the skills to navigate through that. We also have Meet a Friend initiatives before the students start at the college to ensure that in their first week here at the college, they feel comfortable and that they have some go-to people. But we've also done some parent presentations around friendship and the importance of this on our orientation days. and they've been very well received by our parents. Also too, sleep is considered by us as absolutely critical in mental health. And so we have developed a video which was recorded by our college psychologist, and we share this at our parent information evenings because we really believe that sleep is an issue that parents can really make a difference in, that they can control this. They may not be able to control many of the other areas related to mental health, but certainly sleep is one that they can have control of, particularly in relation to phones and social media. Some of the other parent resources that we have developed, and some of these are available on our website if you're interested in having a look. We write blogs around friendships, anxiety, and body image. We've also run a number of book clubs where we have used the books Unselfie and the Resilience Project, where parents read the book prior to, and some also join without having read the book, and that's absolutely fine. But there is discussion that is led by a college psychologist to assist parents in navigating some of the challenges related to mental health. And we've also done a webinar on anxiety and also on a number of other areas, because we really believe that we need to have our parents engaged in understanding anxiety, but also other mental health issues if we are going to partner with them to support their daughters. And fast forward to where we are now, we've always had great pastoral care activities here at the college, but we really needed to have a structure or a guide. And just as Nicole from Loreto spoke about, having a wellbeing curriculum is the focus of our work currently. So we've developed a social and emotional learning curriculum based around 5 key elements. And we have mapped from years 5 to 12 the particular things that we provide for our girls, but also the goals and the achievements we want for them. Looking at the first element there of self-awareness, some of the 4 areas there are around recognising emotions, understanding personal qualities and achievements, understanding themselves as learners, and developing reflective practices. So within each of those 4 areas, we then work out what are the skills and knowledge that we want for our students to develop. So very briefly, that gives you a bit of an overview, but I think something we all need to really be aware of, as you all know very clearly, challenges of mental health are very daunting for us in schools, and what we do will never be enough. But I think we still need to continue to work hard in this space. And I've chosen this image because it is almost like a mountain that we do climb, but I think that every effort that we make, because if we can make a difference for one child or one family, then the work that we do is worth all the time that we spend in this area. So thank you for the opportunity to present, and there is a number of resources available on our website if anybody would like to access those. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's a lot of information from you 4 to take in. I want to extend my deepest thanks to all of you for sharing your insight and expertise. And really, I mostly wish that I was a student in one of your schools so that I could experience that breadth of support. And I found it really inspiring, actually, that so much is happening to support young women, but also in an integrated way that brings in the staff, it brings in the parents, because it's not any one individual responsibility. It's everything that we can do together. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. And as all of our speakers have said today, we will be sending some resources from each of our speakers that will give you a bit more insight into what they've spoken about today. Now we have a few questions. I have some here, but there's also a couple on the Q&A. This is for Nicole and Liana, and probably a question for Rachel as well. How do you encourage girls to check in on their different platforms that they use? So we might start with Nicole. She's there.
Yes, it's always a challenge on getting girls to check in. Or I'll say it's a challenge. It's a yes and no answer, really. We do set a time each week where we say, okay, everyone check in, and that's probably the most effective method. But many of our girls will just check in automatically, and they check in multiple times during the week. So there's no restriction on the number. But we try to build it into our pastoral care program that there's one morning a week, which is our check-in morning.
Great. Rachel?
During the whānau time I was mentioning before, which is kind of like form group or home group time, you might call it, we once a week as well encourage students to check in then, because we find if we just leave it to students to check in, we don't get so much uptake.
And Leona, yours isn't so much app-based. So how do you guys get your students to give you that feedback?
So each week we have, similar to the other speakers, we have crew circle community classes. So we've built up that routine, but I think because we're having students having input into what the platform looks like, there's probably a high degree of engagement because they know that their feedback's going to be taken on board. So they like to track it themselves. So we seem to be having very good uptake at the moment.
Great. And I had a question. Did you get an external company to develop that dashboard for you? Was that something some clever person in your team did?
We actually have a website developer as part of our staff, so that's been very lucky. Yes,
very lucky. And Leona, just another question for you. Can you please just tell us again the name of the Melbourne educator, the Melbourne University educator that you mentioned? Was it somebody Cahill?
Oh, yeah, Helen Cahill from the University of Melbourne.
Okay, great. And then a question to Nicole. Which staff worked on the development of your SEED program?
Yes, it's been quite holistic. So when it came to doing the research of best practice and researching all programs, myself and our psychologist worked on that. So that was to develop the framework, but then to develop the actual program, we have leaders of student wellbeing and academic care. We have an assistant principal of wellbeing and student engagement and our head of junior school. So we have a wellbeing team of staff that work on that on a continual basis.
And am I right in understanding that all staff actively deliver components of this?
Yes.
To their classes.
Every staff member in the school. So it has a responsibility of what we call mentor teachers who do the curriculum, but it is built in across every lesson, every co-curricular activity as a framework across the school. So it's responsibility of everyone, and it is delivered across parents, students and staff. The SEED program, there's a SEED program for parents, one for students, one for staff as well.
All right, fantastic. And Rachel, this is a very important question. Who gets to take Tilly home and look after her?
It is a really important question. Tilly is so gorgeous. So Tilly's lucky enough to live with Marcel, who I mentioned, our guidance counsellor, but every day comes in, and at lunchtime the students can find Tilly in the school library and take Tilly for walks. And so yeah, it's a great way to connect the students because Tilly becomes the focal point.
It's just such a beautiful thing to have. And then from a more practical perspective, do you use the EI Pulse system app just for students, or have you branched out into using it for staff yet?
Great question. Yeah, we use that for staff as well. And that's really, so the staff have agreed that our another one of our deputy principals who's in charge of community can see if they've pushed a button that says I want some help, and Marcel, our counsellor, also sees that. But otherwise that information is anonymous, and it's really just for self-reflection and feedback about and sort of general trends. So we'll look at it as a whole staff and see how we're trending rather than drilling into everyone's moods every day.
And has that had good uptake from staff?
Yeah, pretty good uptake actually. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I had another question for Jen. Jennifer, you talk about the student wellbeing ambassadors, the student mental health ambassadors at least. I'm very interested to know how are those ambassadors equipped to handle those difficult conversations that might crop up with their peers?
We wouldn't be using our students to advise other students, but what they might do is they might be the people who would then say to the students, these are some avenues you can take. We've also got a OneNote, which has been developed, and there's resources there for students as well. So they might direct the students to those places, or in terms of how they can seek assistance from either a staff member or from a college psychologist if needed.
Great. I have another question here. This is probably to all of you. The question is, I'm curious to know if time within the timetable has been devoted to wellbeing programs. I think some of you have said it might have been.
That's a yes for us. We have 2 lessons a week actually devoted to wellbeing, plus every morning during that homeroom time as well.
And we're the same as well. So at Santa Maria, the girls have 2 periods of PCT, pastoral care time, where this would be implemented. But it's also implemented through our health program and also in various other ways. So it's also connected to our camps and other co-curricular opportunities we offer as well.
Great.
For us here at Corowa, we sort of talk about wellbeing as part of our Circle Crew community framework, but it's also integrated into our classroom with social emotional learning. So all of our teachers are putting this through their curriculum documentation. So there's an expectation that that's also being addressed through our learning programs too.
I was just going to add, we also integrate this through our health programs, and just within all classes being culturally competent and responsive, in addition to just the mindfulness where we try and check in twice a day to all take part in that activity. So it keeps us aware and in check that wellbeing is something we are working on regularly. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for taking the time today to share the initiatives from your school. To all of our attendees, before you go, I just wanted to remind you that we have another webinar next week on the 1st of March. And that's called Boost Your Enrollments by Cultivating Highly Engaged Parents. So that will be relevant for some of you and maybe not others. But that is a free webinar and is on the events page on our website. We also have a fantastic range of webinars coming up this year, including 4 other webinars to do with mental health and wellbeing. So I'd encourage you to go and put those dates in your diary. And then lastly, I'm going to send you an email later this afternoon with some resources from today, from our speakers today, and a short feedback form that I'd be really grateful if you could just take a couple of minutes to fill out. So thank you everyone for taking the time, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.